Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to learn today another Maamar together. Shalom Rav Tafshin Lamed Ches. The limud, of course, is Lili Nishmas, Rabbi Gurner, Rabbi Chassid, Michal, Akiva Gershon, Rabbi Rafal, Mנחem, נחום, Rabbi Akiva Wagner, Olav Sholom, in whose merit Project Melukat is taking place. The Maamar we're going to learn was said on Motzei Shabbos Parshas Vayeishev, Mevarchim HaChodesh Tevis, Tafshin Lamed Ches. We all know the basic history. On Shmini Atzeres, Tafshin Lamed Ches, the Rebbe suffered a heart attack during a kafis and moved to his room for the next couple of weeks. While the Rebbe was recovering, he did not stop farbringing. He held on Motzei Shabbos broadcasts. While the Chassidim gathered downstairs in 770, the Rebbe would speak from his room. These farbringings were edited, fascinatingly. Dafka during that time, when the Rebbe was recovering from this severe heart attack, he continued to edit the farbringings, and in a way that was never done before, asking for the sichas, as all the stories are well known. On Rosh Chodesh Kislev, the Rebbe went home, and on Yutes Kislev was the first time the Rebbe appeared publicly for a farbrengen downstairs in 770. The Maamar we learned last time, Padav Shalom Lamed Ches, was said by that farbrengen. Nevertheless, farbrengens didn't return downstairs 770 permanently until after Purim. Between Yutes Kislev and Purim, there was on and off. Sometimes the farbrengens were held downstairs, and other times from the Rebbe's room. All the Shabbos Mevarchim farbrengens, which were on Motzei Shabbos, were broadcast from the Rebbe's room. So Mevarchim HaChodesh Tevis, that was that same week, and we're learning the Maamar tonight. Mevarchim HaChodesh Shvat, Mevarchim HaChodesh Adar Rishon, and Adar Sheni. From Purim, the farbrengens moved back to 770, even though until early to mid Tafshin Mem, the Rebbe would move the Shabbos farbrengens to Motzei Shabbos. It's actually quite a big schus that we have, that now we can listen to the recordings of Shabbos Dika farbrengens, because they were held on Motzei Shabbos, and you can hear Rashi Sichas, things that are mamish treasures to hear from the Rebbe. At any rate, this is the first Shabbos Mevarchim. Mevarchim HaChodesh Tevis, a few days after Yutes Kislev, and the Rebbe said a Maamar, Shalom Rav. It was Muga 10 years later for Yutes Kislev Tafshin Mem Ches. And it's a long Maamar, but it's a gringa Maamar, it's an easy Maamar. The subjects are very classic, things that you come across in Chassidus a lot. Learning Torah with a bittul, and what that accomplishes, both essentially and especially when it's enhanced by Avodas HaTfilah. We're going to talk about Ben and Eved, which is a huge arichas of that in Samach Vav. The difference between the Avodah of the Avos and before Matan Torah to post Matan Torah. Many, many classic musagim, and of course, chidushim from the Rebbe. Most prominently, I guess, is at the end of the Maamar, when the Rebbe talks about Limudat Torah bebitul, leading you not just to the bittul of Eved, not even to the bittul of Ben, but to the bittul of what's known as Hu HaMelech Atzmai. And even though the Rebbe finds a makar for it in Torah, that's classic style of the Rebbe to blame the biggest chidushim on a half a line in Torah, but the Rebbe makes it into Gavaldik Harichos, as well as an allusion to the fact that Dira B'Tachtonim is not the be-all end-all of everything. There are things that are higher than Dira B'Tachtonim, specifically related to the Eibishter's relationship with Yidden during the time of La'asud Lavai, after the Dira B'Tachtonim is created. All that and more, and that's going to be the Maamar tonight. So, Be'ez Hashem, let's get right to it. It says that Rebbe Shalom Rav La'eves Rasecha V'Gomer. It says in Tilim, the pasuk is brought down in the Gemara in a few places. We say it every day in the end of davening. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. During that paragraph, we bring down this pasuk, and the pasuk says, "Much peace will go to those who love your Torah." Says the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe is medayik in his Maamar, which begins with this Dibra Maschel, and it was said, Shabbos Parshas Vayeishev Tafshin Daled, Shebehemshech laHaMaamar Dibra Maschel Padav Shalom Yutes Kislev Tafshin Daled. The Frierdiker Rebbe said this Maamar Shalom Rav Tafshin Daled in continuation to the Maamar that he had said earlier that week on Yutes Kislev. Why the Rebbe makes this point? The Rebbe's own Maamar from Yutes Kislev that year wasn't necessarily based on Tafshin Daled's Padav Shalom, but I think it's related to the concept of Ha'ara 3, where the Rebbe says, L'hoyer sha'akviyus yutes v'chav kislev b'shnas Tafshin Daled hoysar ki b'shana zu Tafshin Memches v'yayim heyu v'yayim vav v'smichos u'vitkifus l'Shabbos Parshas Vayeishev. The year the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maamar was said, Yutes chav kislev went right into Shabbos, like the year the Maamar was Muga. The Maamar was said Lamed Ches. We saw in the other Maamar that it was Tuesday Yutes Kislev. But Memches, Yutes Chav Kislev, was Thursday, Friday, such that it went right into Parshas Vayeishev. And in that way, it's mudgash, the kesher between a Shabbos Parshas Vayeishev Dike Maamar to the theme of Yitas Kislev. So the Rebbe is saying that the Maamar that this Maamar is based on was said behemshech to Yitas Kislev, and now we're in a day, Shabbos Parshas Vayeishev, Baruch HaMachedesh Tevis, we're in a day which is connected and directly related to Yitas Kislev. Al Kol Panim, the Frierdiker Rebbe asks in the Maamar, Mahu Inyan Sholem Rav. What is the meaning of the wording much peace? A greater type of peace. Shemizah muvan sheyeh shalom stam, u'b'lashon ha'maamar sham shalom ma'at, v'shalom rav. Because the implication is that there's regular peace, default type of peace, or as the Frierdiker Rebbe calls it, shalom ma'at in the beginning of the Maamar, and the end of the Maamar the Rebbe says in R4, u'b'siyam ha'maamar sham kaidol as shalom stam. So that's the name we're going to give it. There's regular peace and there's a lot of peace. Now, the Pashtas should point out, shalom rav, the rav is not necessarily describing the shalom. It's not an adjective to the peace. It's saying, this shalom, a lot of it will go to Oyav Yisrael Asecha. So there's really one type of shalom, of which there could be a little bit or a lot. The understanding over here going into it is that shalom rav, the rav is a description to the shalom. It's a different type of shalom. It's not regular shalom, it's shalom rav. It's a greater peace. And on that, the Frierdiker Rebbe is asking, Shalom Rav implies that the Shalom Ma'at or Shalom Stam. And so the question would then be, why is the pasuk here stressing the idea of Shalom Rav, the greater type of peace? V'gam, another question the Frierdiker Rebbe asks is, Mahu lo'oyav yisei asecha. What is the meaning of the choice of words here? Those who love your Torah. Torah and love don't seem to be related. Halei Torah hi chachma u'bina. K'mish kasuv ki chachmaschem u'binaschem. Torah is intellectual. Torah is academic. Torah is wisdom. Torah is understanding. The Torah itself describes itself as understanding. Torah is your wisdom, your understanding relative to the nations. And therefore, the better descriptive term for those who are engaged in Torah would be some kind of expression of learning, which would then relate to Chachma Ubina. Not love. Love and ideas don't necessarily, on the technical level, work together. So the more appropriate expression would be something to do with limut. So the Frierdiker Rebbe explains essentially what we call in Nigla, kushya achas miteretzes bechaverta. One question answers the other. The reason why it's Shalom Rav is because we're dealing with Oyav Yisei Asecha, a different category of people that are engaged with Torah. Not engaged with Torah in the classic learning, intellectual style. They're engaged with Torah with a love. And because they're engaged with Torah with a love, the peace that they achieve is a greater type of peace. She'oyav Yisei Asecha, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, hu she'oyav mitzad Torah leirak mitzad Torah atzma, mitzad chachma sheba, ki im mitzad neisen Torah. These people that we're talking about in this pasuk are such lovers of the Torah, they don't love the Torah only on account of the Torah itself, the wisdom within it. Rather, they love the Torah on account of the giver of the Torah present in the Torah. And it's actually hinted in the pasuk, Oyav Yisei Asecha. We're talking about those who love your Torah. Not just Oyavei HaTorah, lovers of the Torah. Lovers of the you in the Torah. The Rebbe in R7 is Meir, Lahar Me'ayem Yem Beis Tevis, and the Maamar of Chanukah. These are famous diyukim that we know, actually coming to Chanukah, that in Alanissim we say that the Yevanim came lahashkicham terasecha, ulahavira mechukei retzeinecha. Lashon Hayem Yem is, the Milchemes HaYevanim was to make the Yidden forget Torah and transgress the chukei retzeinecha, o kemaimer kisvu, she'en lechem chelik b'likei Yisrael. They used to say right to the Jews, write down that you don't have a portion with the Eibishter, which means, kol ha-milchama is ha-neged ha-likus. The whole war was against the likus. And the Rebbe says in Hayem Yom, Zol men lernen Torah, Zol men mekayim zayin mitzvahs, ha-mishpatim beit, learn Torah, do the mitzvahs. Rak shalei lahazkir shei Torah Hashem, v'sha mitzvahs im chukei ritzeini yizbarich. Nid der mannen in Torah mitzvahs, the minion von Gettlichkeit. The cha in the Torah, the Eibishter in the Torah, that's what was bothering the Yevanim. And over here, the Rebbe is being Meir, the same thing when it comes to Oyav Yisei Asecha on the positive side. What's the specialty of the Oyav Yisei Asecha? That they're focused on the cha, on the Neisen HaTorah. V'zeu Sholom Rav le'eves terasecha. And this is why the pasuk is phrased in this way. The greater peace goes to those who love your Torah. Sha'asholim shenasai l'limdat Torah stam. Taka shalom stam. Shalom at. Were we talking about regular limud Torah, then the shalom that would be elicited as a response to that is the regular peace. Shalom at, a miniature type of peace. When the Torah learning is infused, not just with love to the Torah, which in its literal sense would mean love to the intellect in the Torah, but also it's permeated with a love to the Eibishter, umuvan shagam ba'avas Yisrael. The Rebbe adds parenthetically. It's obvious that if you're talking about a person who has avas Torah and avas Hashem, there's certainly avas Yisrael coming along over there. Shari avas Yisrael li klila avas Hashem, because avas Yisrael is the vessel, is the vehicle to avas Hashem, and we'll get to R8 in a second. V'ad shehem kul echad, to the point that they're all one. So when the person learns Torah in this way, nimshach shalom rav, shalom ayla mishalom stam. Take, he elicits a greater type of peace, qualitatively, different echos, a different type, a higher level of shalom, because he's not learning Torah stam, he's oyhaveh serasecha. Stam, I should point out, in the English language also we do use the terminology love with ideas. Like, someone tells you a geschmack of art and you go, I love that. I love that concept. But even when we use that term of love about ideas, first of all, we're not targeting the intellectual element of it. We're targeting the subjective element of it. But more so, the ava that's being expressed is actually an ava that relates to us, not that relates to the concept in its purest sense. In other words, it's more of a selfish ava. Here, the Eves Harasecha is a selfless ava. A regular love to an idea would be lower than the limud. Eves Harasecha is higher than the limud. These people are not just learning Torah stam, they're learning Torah permeated with avas HaTorah, as with avas Hashem, the love to the Nesan HaTorah. And that's what's giving them Shalom Rav. Just before we continue, let's do Ha'ara 8. This part of avas Yisrael is a kli to avas Hashem. The Rebbe is mitzvah to a few places. The Torah Sadmur Azakin, it's the Alter Rebbe's Torah, and it's brought in a few places. It's brought in Esofas Teranat. This is a Maamar, actually. It's printed in Anat, but it's a Maamar from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Said Behemshech to Hecholzu, to the union of Avas Yisrael and Hecholzu, which is a Maamar in Anat. It's brought in Atamim and Igros of the Frierdiker Rebbe. That's the same thing. And Atamim is a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and it's brought in Kunter's Teres Achsidus, which is the same as the Hayom Yom Vav Tishrei. During Aseret Simei Tshuva, the Hayom Yoms talk about Tshuva, Tes, Shin, Vav, Beis, and Hey, different Avodah and Tshuva, and the Avodah of Vav is V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, V'ahavta L'recha Kamocha, and the Hayom Yom says, as the Alter Rebbe said, that it's a kli ta'avas Hashem. And then you have Sefer HaSichos. So I guess the main arichos is really in Hatamim, in the letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe, where he talks about the story that the Rebbe Marash told the Rebbe Rashab on his bar mitzvah, and he recounted what the Tzemach Tzedek told him at his bar mitzvah, that on Shabbos Parshas Vayeishev on Tav Kuf Nun Vav, the Alter Rebbe said a Torah on the pasuk V'ahavta, and he asked the question of the Magid, how could there be a tzivui on Abba Shebelev? And he explained the Magid's answer that the tzivui is on his bonus. U'b'soich hadvarim amar, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha is a kli ta'avas Hashem. And the figure writes in the letter, Chsidim hayu soifrim u'moinim tevas hamayna. Chsidim used to count, enumerate the words of the Alter Rebbe's expression. And one of the things that they were medayik in is that if he said that Avas Yisrael is a kli to Avas Hashem, that means that the mechanism that fuels both is the same. The same way Avas Hashem is fed or is built through his bonus, so sometimes Avas Yisrael needs to be cultivated through his bonus. Sometimes you have to actually contemplate, spend time meditating on the fact that you have to love every single yid and how to find ways to love every single yid. So that's the letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Maamar in Anat is the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about how Kedusha, everything in Kedusha is Achdus. And one of the examples is that the Avas Yisrael is a kli to Avas Hashem Elokecha. Avas Hashem Elokecha is the ultimate of davening. It's the pinnacle of davening. All to get the V'ahavta, and the kli to that is Avas Yisrael. And this nekuda of Avas Yisrael being kli to Avas Hashem, and the last expression of kul achad, was first used by the Frierdiker Rebbe by the first Farbrengen after coming to America. Tes Adar Sheni Tafshin. Sefer HaSichos is right there. The Frierdiker Rebbe talks about how there's a difference between the expression of hiskashrus and dveikus and kulachad. Hiskashrus and dveikus still imply a separation. Two things are connected, two things are bound, but there's still two things. Kulachad means there's no chiluk between them. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says that an example for this can be seen in the Gemara, that the ger came to Hillel and he said, teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one foot. What did Hillel say to him? In other words, the mitzvah Avos Yisrael. It says that Avos Yisrael is ikar kol ikrim. So the Frierdiker Rebbe asked, why didn't Hillel say loving the Eibishter? It's also ikar kol ikrim. It's from dem araya that Avos Yisrael and Avos Hashem are kulachad. They're all the same thing. And he brought down the Alter Rebbe's word that one is a kli to the other. So, it's interesting to point out that that's all the Melukat in R8 about the Avos Yisrael being a kli to Avos Hashem. And so that if somebody is a true Oivei Serasecha, then certainly it's accompanied with Avos Yisrael. And of course, we all know that Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe's first Farbrengen, the Rebbe said, Azlas Lakarta Avdas Kenimusa, you do the customs of the country that you're in. People like to hear statements. When someone takes on a new position of leadership, they want to hear a statement. So the Rebbe said, if you want a statement, this is my statement. The Shveret gesagt that Avos Hashem, Avos Yisrael, and Avos HaTorah are kulachad. So the Rebbe actually used this nekuda very much in the beginning of the Nesias, and Milanu Gadol Mimeisha, of course, the Rebbe himself was a living example of this fusion of Avos Hashem, Avos Yisrael, and Avos HaTorah. Al Kol Panim, that's the summary of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maamar. That Sholom Rav Le'Oivei Serasecha. We want to know, why does it say a greater peace, and why does it say Oivei Serasecha? Well, that's exactly why. Because you're dealing with Oivei Serasecha, that's why you have Sholom Rav. So now what's going to happen is, the Rebbe is going to expound this inyan of Oivei Serasecha. What creates this type of relationship with Torah, where you have an Ava Mitzad Neisan Torah? And then, that's going to go till about the end of Sif Daled. And then after we have a clarity in the Pasuk Shalom Rav Le'Oivei Serasecha itself, from Sif Hey and on, the Rebbe is going to juxtapose this Pasuk against the Pasuk that we say before it in Gemara and in Davening. V'rav Shloim B'noich. And by juxtaposing this Pasuk against that one, we're going to appreciate an even deeper Pshat in Shalom Rav Le'Oivei Serasecha, because V'rav Shloim B'noich is going to be already a very deep darga in Limud HaTorah, and Shalom Rav Le'Oivei Serasecha is going to emerge to be even deeper than that. So that's the map of where we're heading. Says the Rebbe Sif Beis. V'hine, inyan Oivei Serasecha sha'ava l'Torah hi mitzad nesan ha'Torah. This inyan of being an Oivei Serasecha, where the love to Torah is not because of the Torah itself, but because of the nesan ha'Torah. Mevur b'Maamar anal shezanas al yedei akdamas avodas hatefila. The Frierdiker Rebbe explains in the Maamar that this type of relationship with Torah has to be prefaced by avodas hatefila. And the Rebbe wants to explain why. Forget davening for a second. Let's zoom out to Avodah. We have three pillars, the rules and the three pillars, Torah, Avodah, Gmus Chasad. Avodah. When we're talking about serving Hashem, the mainstay of serving Hashem is Avos Hashem. Maamar the Rebbe says, Leis pulchana ki pulchana derichimusa. It's an original language that Rebbe is Motzei into two zayers in Ara 10. Pretty much say the same thing. The lashon is Leis le pulchana lekutchabrichu k'marichimusa, or Leis lach pulchana k'marichimusa lekutchabrichu. But Chassidus' lashon is Leis pulchana k'pulchana derichimusa. There is no service like the service of love. So when we're talking about Avodah, Ava is the focal point. V'zeh shayach gam lekava Avodah. Is b'meila, if the ikar of Avodah b'chlal is Avos Hashem, so that can be zoomed in to the kava Avodah of Torah Avodah Gmach, Klolos Inyan Avodah Inyan Atfila, which the generality of Avodah in this context is the Avodah of davening. Again, if Avodah b'chlal, the ikar Avodah is Avos Hashem, so Tfila, which is the kava Avodah, is also focused on Avos Hashem. Ki Avodah v'yegiyah di Tfila hu lav el Avos Hashem. The work and the toil in davening, the journey of davening, is to come to a closeness, to a relationship, to a connection, to a love of Hashem. And this is why Oivei Serasecha can only be achieved through prefacing Avodas Hatefila. Because what's Ohev Asecha? Ohev Asecha is to achieve a relationship with Torah that goes beyond the Torah itself, to love the Nesan Torah. So you have to first cultivate an Abbas Hashem, and that comes through davening. Through davening, you come to Abbas Hashem. When you're filled with a love to the Eibishter, so then you become an Ohev Asecha as well. That your love to the Torah also becomes not on account of the Torah, but on account of the Nesan Torah. Which extends, as the Rebbe is about to explain now, to Luminat Torah Bichlal. Forget Ohev Asecha. Bichlal, there's something to be said about Torah that comes after Avodas HaTefillah. V'zeh gam Hashem avur b'kama mekaymes b'inyin Tfilas Abba Binyamin shetei Tfilasi smucha limitasi. There is a Gemara in Brachas. The Gemara says, Tanya Abba Binyamin Omer. Abba Binyamin used to say, Al Shnei Dvarim Yusim Mitzdayer Kol Yamai. There were two things that I put myself through great pains all my life. And the first one was, Al Tfilasi shetehei lifnei mitasi. That my davening should be in front of my bed. And the Gemara asks a question, what does it mean lifnei mitasi? It's not really true. The Gemara corrects it, Lo teima lifnei mitasi ala ema samach limitasi. I want my davening to be close to my bed. Says Rashi, samach limitasi, kol yamai nizharti. I'm quoting from Rashi now. All my days I was careful, shaloi lasis malacha, v'shaloi lasik batera. I didn't do work and I didn't learn Torah. I didn't do work, I didn't learn Torah as soon as I got up from my bed until I said Krishma and David. Tosfos argues on Rashi. Tosfos says that doing work, that's what he meant. But Rashi Pirish Afilu Lilmud also Lilmud Kedem Atfila. Tosfos says Leidati Minole. I don't know where Rashi got that from. You can't learn before davening, but definitely work. So, a kopan in the classic gang in Chassidus goes with Rashi. The Rashi was saying, I don't want to learn Torah. Abba Binyamin was saying, I don't want to learn Torah until I daven. So what's the pshat of that? Shemaylas limudat Torah hu keshu ba la'achrei tefillah dafka. The mila of limudat Torah is fully achieved only when it comes after davening. Hagam she'avedas tefillah yikav b'fnei atzmei v'talmud Torah yikav b'fnei atzmei. L'chayda, there are two different roads. The road of davening and the road of learning. It's two different kavim and aveda. Why should one influence the other? Why is the mila of limudat Torah only fully achieved when it comes after tefillah? So Chassidus explains. Because when you put davening first, the journey to Avas Hashem first, the learning that follows that is on a higher level. Till the point that you can achieve the level of Ohev Asecha, which is again being engaged with Torah to the point that you love the Torah, not mitzvah the Torah itself, but mitzvah the nation of Torah. So we're talking about such special people, Ohev Asecha, but the truth is Bichlal. Limud Torah is enhanced by Avodas HaTefillah. And this, the Rebbe wants to delve into for a second now, till Sif Hey. This Nakuda of Tefillah, of Limud Torah being enhanced through Avodas HaTefillah, specifically to bring it to a level of Ohev Asecha. And here we go to an extremely classic concept in Chassidus. The Yuvan Zabahag the Maamar Azal al Pasuk al Ma of the Haaretz the Geimer al Ozvam es Terasi. Let's understand this first by prefacing the Maamar Azal. The Pasuk says, why was the earth destroyed? Why was the Eretz Yisrael destroyed? Because the Yidden left my Torah. Zok the Gemara, what does it mean they left my Torah? Al Shalei Baruchu B'Torah Tchila. They did not make a bracha on the Torah before they learned. That's the Gemara. Strange Gemara. Everybody wants to know what's pshat. Just for not making a bracha on Torah first, you destroy the land. What's the connection between the two? But the Rebbe says before we explain it, let's just first see what we have. If the Gemara tells you that Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila caused a churban of Eretz Yisrael, that tells you two things. The Mizeh move on, first of all, she'inyan Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila hu inyan ikri lo yirak ba'avodas ha'adam bichlal. That Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila is a fundamental concept, not just in avodas ha'adam bichlal, but achal yedei zeh shel Baruch Hu B'Torah of the haaretz, elagam b'limudat Torah. Not making a bracha caused the land to be destroyed, which means that it's got something to do, it's correlated with the general purpose of man on this earth. By not doing Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, we destroyed the earth, the land of Eretz Yisrael at least. Which means that there was a direct link between what you were supposed to do in general as a person, and not making that bracha on Torah first. But more so, it's an inyan ikri within the context of limud Torah. Because the phenomenon of not making a bracha before learning is considered in the pasuk to be leaving the Torah. Which means that if you don't have baruch b'Torah tchila, you're missing something fundamental in your limud. But the truth is that it's not leaving Torah bichlal. Very similar to the concept of Eves, where the focus was on the Cha Shabbatayra. Here also, Azvam es Torah Si. The lack of Baruch HaBatayra Tchila constitutes not so much leaving the Torah, but leaving the Eibishter in the Torah, forsaking the Eibishter in the Torah. Tehine, and here the Rebbe kind of shifts to explain what is the Chisaron of Le Baruch HaBatayra Tchila. Inyan Baruch HaBatayra Tchila hu lahamshich. Baruch HaBatayra Tchila, in its wider meaning, is to draw down an energy. Not just the recitation of a bracha. It's the uftu of the bracha. Lahamshich, hamshachas bracha v'shefa b'seicha Torah. Drawing down some kind of blessing, some kind of flow into the Torah. Ukumuvan gami aloshin baruchu bi Torah, or ba Torah. The grammar seemingly is incorrect. The lechura havale l'meimar baruchu lefaneha. Make a bracha before learning Torah. Lifin limud Torah. Umau baruchu bat Torah. What does it mean to make a bracha in the Torah? Ki bracha hi malashon hamshacha. Because the bracha is supposed to bring something down. The classic example that Chassidus brings from the Mishnah in Klayim, somebody who brings down a grapevine in order to replant it and it should grow, that's called mavrich. The act of moving the branch down is called mavrich. So you're trying to achieve a hamshacha. And the Rebbe says that the example is precise. It's not just Chassidus bringing an example where you see mavrich, bracha lashon hamshacha. They choose the example that matches the teichen. They choose planting. Ki teiro mitzvesehu inyan shel zriya ba'aretz. Because b'chlal teiro mitzvah is planting in the earth. We're planting things that are going to grow later. We're planting Eidus and Atzilus that are going to come out later. We're having effects in this world which are only going to become apparent later. The point is, bracha lashon hamshacha is not just illustrated by a mavrich hasagefen, but that actually is the teichen of Torah and mitzvahs. In Ara 18, the Rebbe brings that the example of a mavrich hasagefen is brought in Torah but in Likkutei Torah and Sefer Mem Tef Kosem Zayin, they say baruch hu malashon hamshachas breicha, diverting a pool of water. But I'm thinking that even according to that example, it's the same thing. Usually hamshachas breicha is done with tzorech hazriya v'anatiyah. The reason why you would divert a water channel is to get it to your field, to irrigate, and to help grow. So it's the same theme. Torah and mitzvahs is in of zriya ba'aretz, so we use an example of things that are related to planting in the earth. Akopanim baruch hu is a hamshacha. Ubaruch hu ba'Torah hu inyan hamshachas er insaf b'seicha Torah. Baruch hu ba'Torah is to bring the infinity into Torah. Torah on its own, we're going to see in a minute a little bit more about this, is chachma. Limited, sophisticated, but limited intellectual wisdom. Baruch hu ba'Torah is to appreciate the infinity in the Torah, the Eid Insaf in the Torah. Hu inyan neisa katera lishma, which, by the way, is the meaning of true learning Torah lishma. L'shema Torah atzma. You learn Torah for its sake. Usually all the pshatim in lishma talk about your level of dedication. What's your level of devotion? What's your purpose? But in the end, it's all selfish. Lishma, in its truest sense, is l'shema Torah atzma, for Torah itself. Lahamshich ba gilead insaf shelamayla me'achachma. Was suchst du in Torah garnished? When you learn Torah, you're looking to bring the Eibusher into the Torah, to enhance the Torah. Ba'al mashkasu b'sefer Rabbi, u'b'sefer Mayan HaChachma. Sefer Rabbi is a Kabbalah sefer that's miyuchas to Reb Chunim ben Akana, one of the Tanoim, and Mayan HaChachma is actually a sefer that's miyuchas to Moshe Rabbeinu, a super early Kabbalah sefer. And the expression in both Sfarim is Shedavid mechaber Torah b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. David HaMelech is to learn Torah to connect the Eibishter to connect the Torah with the Eibishter. That was the highest level of learning Torah. He was doing it for the Torah, not for himself. The whole inyan in Limud Torah was to bring the Torah and the Eibishter closer together. And that's the meaning of the pasuk. How did the Yidden leave my Torah? Not Torah b'chlal. How did they leave my Torah? How did they leave me out of it? They didn't make a bracha. In other words, were they to do the bracha in Torah? Were they to be focused on the hamshacha of Eidin Sof in Torah? Hinases Torah si. Then it becomes the Eibishter's Torah. Shemamshich b'Eidin Sof. When you're missing the bracha, when you're missing the hamshacha, when you're missing the Eidin Sof, you don't have Torah si. Torah then remains as it is on its own, with no revelation of infinity. Torah on its own is chachma. The Eibush is chachma. But the Eibush's chachma is limited. Eidin Sof is unlimited. Without the Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, you're missing the Torah Si, you're missing the Eibush, the Eidin Sof in the Torah. The Rebbe doesn't get into it over here, why that caused of the Haaretz. But it's focused more on the Inyan of Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila. The pshat in that. The pshat in that is that when you don't have Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, you're leaving the Torah Si. You're leaving the Eibush out of the Torah. Now, what's wrong? I'll leave it at what's wrong. What's missing when you don't have Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila? If Torah on its own is the Eibishter's chachma, and it's chachma of the Eibishter, so we're talking about infinite wisdom. So yeah, Baruch Hu, Nishta Baruch Hu, what's the difference? So the Rebbe asks, "V'hagam shegam ha'Torah kameshim tzadatzma." He trusts Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though the Torah on its own is also the Eibishter's Torah, and the Eibishter's Torah hu v'chachmas echad. The Eibishter is one with his Torah. Totally united with the Eibishter. The gam kasher leim da adam leitar. He dvarav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A person could be in whatever state he is. It could be even not tar, and he's learning the Eibishter's Torah. Shalachin einam mekabelas tuma, which is why the din is that the Torah is not mekabel tuma. Maamar Razal pasuk alei kei dvari kaish ma eish einam mekabel tuma av divrei Torah einam mekabel tuma. The Gemara says, the pasuk says in Yirmiyah, that the Eibishter's words are like fire. Fire is not mekabel tuma. Torah is not mekabel tuma. The hagam sha'adam leitar halimid esatera ein shayach la'aved lechaber Torah b'Kadosh Baruch Hu ve'ein shayach gam la'aved de Baruch Hu b'Torah tchila la'amshich Eidin Sof b'Torah u'mikol mekem gam ha'Torah shaloi yidvarav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'nim shlo le'esh b'tivay l'mayla. It has all the properties. A guy who's not Torah certainly cannot do the highest level of bringing Torah with the Eibishter together, l'shma. Not even Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila bringing Eidin Sof in Torah. And nevertheless, when he learns Torah, he's learning the Eibishter's words, and it's compared to fire. Fire in the halachic sense of not being mekabel tumah, but fire also in the ruchnistic sense. Shebetiva el l'mayla, the Rebbe is mitzayin to the Rambam and Tanya, Periketes, but the neshama being a fire that the teva, which is higher than Tam V'das, it wants to constantly become eis mitzias. That kind of an eish. That's what the Torah of every single yid is, even an adam leitar. So you're missing the Baruch Hu is vas. It's the Eibishter's Torah. And the Rebbe adds in R 25, the nekud of it being the Eibishter's Torah, v'yeshleimer the zel sha'adin the ein divrei Torah mekabel tuma l'meid mashkasuv haloi koi dvari kaish. I think the stress on dvari is to show you that it's still the Eibishter's words. We're saying before Torah si, yeah, the Eibishter's in the Torah. Even when it's being learned through a person that's not Torah, it's still dvari. It's still the Eibishter's. In 28, it goes even further. Eba Maamar Yiseda Mizu. In Fidik Rebbe's Maamar. The gam mishum egal leponim b'Torah shalei ka'alacha afilu k'sha'esus zeh b'mezid gam oz ha'Torah nishares b'tarasa. A person could be saying directly wrong pshat, purposely, and the Torah remains pure. Your impurity can't contaminate the Torah. Ad kedei kach that it cannot be violated by a adam leitar on the worst level. So what's the Baruch Hu adding? So the Rebbe says that he move on. It's understood. The adam leitar he dvarav. The fact that when a Torah is learned through a person who's not Torah, it remains the Eibishter's words, the Eibishter's wisdom. That's all behelim at that point. It's all hidden. Incomparable to a situation where you can create that the Eibishter's Torah should become Torah C in a revealed way. Especially when you consider that we're talking about a whole new dimension in Torah. Not just bringing the Eibishter to be present in the Torah, to bring a whole new element of Torah, higher than the Chachma. The Chachma in Torah is one level, granted, but it's all Chachma, all limited, all Gvul. Eid Sof is an even higher level. In other words, even if Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila would just simply mean bringing a divine awareness into the Torah, there would already be a difference between a person who's learning it Loitar and a person who's learning it with Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila. Because without the Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, it's hidden. With the Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, it's revealed. Kol Shkin Kal V'Chomer, if you consider the fact that Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila actually brings in a whole new level. The light of Torah is called in elsewhere in Chassidus, the Ur. Otherwise, it's Cheshech, unclarity, mix-up, entanglement, confusion. And when you see the Ur, everything is clear. The Rebbe explains in other places. The Gemara says that if not for the Shviras Haluchos, so the Yidden would only have the Luchos Rishonos and Torah Shabiksav, Chumushach Mishtera, and Sefer Yeshua. And that's it. Only because of the Luchos Shnias, we got the whole Torah Shabiksav, Torah Shabbal Peh, the whole thing. So what? So because we sin, we get more? The Rebbe once explained, I forget where now, the Rebbe once explained that no. The vart is that had we not sinned with the Egel Azav, we would be in tune to the Eid and Saf in Torah. And when we would open up Torah Shabiksav, we would know the whole Torah Shabbal Peh from there. The whole reason we have to come out to Torah Shabbal Peh to explain and to expound and to understand every word in Torah Shabiksav, and it's all unclear, is because we sinned. And we don't have access to the Eid and Saf, to the Ur Shabbat. Had we had access to the Ur Shabbat, we would open up the Sefer Bereshis and we would have the whole Shulchan Aruch. Why we need Sefer Yeshua is another story. It's because it's the shtar, it's the legal deed to Eretz Yisrael. But Akol Panim, there's Nakud of Gilead and Saf. That's Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila. That's bringing the Eibishter into the Torah, bringing the Eibishter Kite into the Torah, the Eid and Saf into Torah. In Ara 30, the Rebbe says on the end of the Sif that Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila is bringing down Gilead and Saf. Shegilui zeh lo yeshnei b'haTorah kameshim tad atzma gam b'Torah shalamayla. That Eid and Saf is missing on every dimension of Torah on its own. Even the way Torah is lamayla. Forget the way Torah is lamata. Even the way Torah is lamayla, it's missing that Eid and Saf. Shei Davidai mechaber Torah shalamayla b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. The lashon in Sefer Rabbi, Ma'ayin HaChachma, even though they didn't quote it over here in the Pnim, the Rebbe just said Davidai mechaber Torah b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. But the lashon actually is Davidai mechaber Torah shalamayla b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, even Torah the way it's lamayla remains Chachma without the Yid's Pu'ula of Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila. And so therefore, that tells you how great Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila is. So tying that back now to our conversation about how in general Limud HaTorah is enhanced through Avodas HaTefillah. So the Rebbe takes this whole beer in Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila and applies it. Bal Pizeh Yuvan, based on this understood, whatever extra advantage Torah learning has after davening, it's not just enhancing your learning. That you become a different type of person. You appreciate not just Torah, but you appreciate the Eibishter. Canal Sif base. It also enhances the Avos Hashem, which permeates your Torah learning, also enhances the Torah. Because when can you truly do Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, which is bringing Eid and Saf in Torah, is mainly when you learn Torah after Avodas HaTefillah. Why? Because Tefillah and what you're looking for in bringing Eid and Saf in Torah is the same thing. Bringing Eid and Saf into Torah happens mainly when you learn Torah with bittul. learning Torah with bittul happens through davening, because tefillah is bittul, as we're going to go now on an arichos. So because tefillah is bittul, and that's what allows you to do limdat Torah b'bittul, to have Hamshachas Ein Sof, so therefore it turns out that the limdat Torah that's enhanced through davening is not just your experience, but Torah's experience as well. The Rebbe says in R32 that maybe it's possible to achieve a broken heart through other reasons without davening. But it's incomparable to the bittul that can create through davening when you're literally standing in front of the Eibishter. And so that bittul is created through davening, which allows you to learn Torah through bittul, which allows you to be mamshech ein sof b'Torah. The Rebbe over here says be'ikr. Hamshachas ein sof b'Torah is be'ikr through the Torah b'bittul. That be'ikr is going to become very understood in the hemshech of the Maamar, when we see that in truth, Hamshachas ein sof b'Torah doesn't necessarily need bittul. It can be done with what the Rebbe calls later without the hakdama of Avodas HaTefillah. Only the highest level of Sholom Rav Le'eves Terasecha, that level can only be achieved when there's bittul. But suffice it for now to say that on a classic level, Hamshachas ein sof b'Torah needs to have bittul. And tefillah is bittul. How is tefillah bittul? So the Rebbe goes down to whole arichos now. Dini tefillah when you're not bittul. Shabeis ha-tefillah tzarich lamed ke'eved lifnei rabbi. First of all, halachically, when you daven, you have to stand like a servant before his master. Shu bittul nali yeser afil mer bittul l'krishma. That's an even higher bittul than you might have achieved during earlier parts of davening, during Shema, for example. The Bikrishma, Avsha Osir Lirmiz Be'einav Alikritz Bisfasav Laras Betz Ba'isav, in Krishma, even though there's also limitations on what you can do with your body. You can't wink with your eyes, or motion with your lips, or show with your fingers. Mikol Makoim, Yesh Kamla Yanim, She'efshel Lahafsik Bikrishma. There are many situations, or many times, when you're able to be mafsik during Krishma. Mashenkin Mitfilah. Mashenkin during davening. And not just a quantitative difference, that, here there's more times when you can be mafsik, and tefillah you can't be mafsik. In 35, the Rebbe says, even the limitation in during Krishma, of not making motions with your hands or with your body parts, mifura shamatam shenirik kreda b'derech arak. The halacha gives the reason why that is. Because we don't want it to appear as if you're reading, stam by chance. V'lei kol kach in the bittul. The stress isn't so much on the idea of bittul. V'afilu bazeh yisasham, the Parsha Shniya, mutar lirmis v'chuli, tzerich mitzvah k'tzas, tzerich malacha, and there's also exceptions to that limitation. For a mitzvah, for malacha, you can even violate that. So even if it was an inyan of bittul, it's a much lower type of limitation. Kol shkem kal v'chema, that it's not. It's just a protection not to be created derech ara. Is la kol panim tefillah is a greater bittul than krishma, even on a halachic level, not just in quantity but also in quality. To the point that krishma can be done even sitting. Davening Shemoneh Esrei only be done standing. The whole definition of standing, if you want to get to it, is davening. Difference between sitting and standing is a settled state. More of a comfortable state. Less of a submissive state. Less of a bittul state. Vayeishev Yankov is, Yankov wanted to sit in peace. Real sitting, Torah sitting, is sitting in peace. Sitting with relaxation. Sitting without the constant thought of being submissive to a higher master. Less of an avdas, less of a bittul. So krishma can be done even with yeshiva. Krishma can be done even in a lesser state, where bittul isn't part of your mindset. Mashenkin amida meir al bittul. Mashenkin amida is a bittul. In R39, the Rebbe says that in the Torah, he brings the Gemara that says, Ein amida ala shtika. Amida means standing, means being quiet. Upira shtika, says the Alter Rebbe, hainu b'chinas bittul mikel v'cher. So it's kind of relates, because you have Ein amida ala tefillah, Ein amida ala shtika, both are the same concept. Shtika is bitul mikol v'chol. True tefillah is bitul mikol v'chol. Is b'meila tefillah is bitul. V'yidei bitul de tefillah gam lim da teira shel achri tefillah ube bitul. V'nim shachba gilir insaf. So through the bitul of davening, the lim da teira following davening will also be bitul, and that will allow you to bring a gilir insaf into the learning. And as a side, the Rebbe adds, "V'yesh leimar shezui shayches beza pirushim b'medrash ala pasuk v'hini sulam mutzav arza v'reisha magia shamayma." This is the connection between the two pirushim in medrash on the interpretation of the sulam in Yaakov's dream. What was the sulam? Pirush echad sulam zeh hakevesh tefillah, u'pirush bei sulam zeh sinai teira. One says sulam represents the ramp on the mizbeach, which is davening, because mizbeach is avodah of karbanos, and that's the same thing as davening. Tefillah b'm karbanos tiknu, which, by the way, the Zera says clearly in 42 that Rebbe brings Pirush HaZayar Sulam Datz Loisa. The latter is davening. Second Pirush in the Medrash is Sulam is Sinai, Har Sinai. Har Sinai is the quintessential representation of Torah. What's the connection? They're both heading towards the same destination. When you put davening before the learning, it puts an ilui also into the Torah. Not just, again, Yir Limud Torah, Torah itself. Shanim Shachba, Gilead Insaf. An extra Gilead of infinity, infinite light, is brought down into the Torah. So with this we conclude the first part of the Maamar. A full appreciation for Shalom Rav La'eh V'Sirasecha. La'eh V'Sirasecha are a special type of people. They don't learn Torah or love the Torah because of Torah itself. They love the Torah because of the Eibishter in the Torah. That awareness comes to them because they daven first. Davening, the whole inyan of davening is bittul. And because the davening is bittul, so the learning Torah is infused with bittul. And when it's infused with bittul, you can bring down Torah C, you can bring the Eibishter in the Torah, and then Mele, you can have a relationship with the Eibishter in the Torah. You can have a love for the Nesan Torah that's present in the Torah, which you can only appreciate when you have bittul. Leaving it at this, so it's a pretty basic explanation. There's regular Leim de Torah, and there's Eivus Erasecha. One achieves one type of Shalom, Eivus Erasecha achieves Shalom Rav. The Rebbe, though, now, as I said before, is going to juxtapose this pasuk against the earlier pasuk that we say before it in the Gemara, before it in davening. And it's when you put the two together, it seems like it's already a repetition. Everything we're saying, Shalom Rav Le'eves Terasecha, is already said in the previous pasuk, B'chol B'nayich Lemudi Hashem, V'dav Shleim B'nayich. And so, the fact that the Gemara adds the pasuk after B'chol B'nayich tells you there has to be another level. What's that other level? It says that Rebbe Sifei, Yachadayin Tzarech La'avim Mash Pasuk Zeh, Shalom Rav Le'eves Terasecha, Ba Behemshich U'V'Hisaf V'Lamash Kasu, V'chol B'nayich Lemudi Havaya, V'dav Shleim B'nayich. We darf noch verstehen why this pasuk Shalom Rav Le'eves Terasecha comes in the Gemara and in davening as well, in addition to, which means over and above the earlier pasuk Chol B'nayich Lemudi Hashem V'dav Shleim B'nayich. Literally, that pasuk means all your sons are students of the Eibishter, and much peace belongs to your sons. Gam limud Torah the B'nayich Lemudi Havaya v'Geimer B'nayich hu la'acharei hagdamas avodas tefillah. L'chura. And the Rebbe says l'chura because it's going to come out that it's not so simple. But l'chura, whatever type of limudei havaya these banayich are doing, whatever type of learning the Eibishter's Torah these kids are doing, these sons are doing, must be infused with davening. Shadei kasav ben v'rav shleim. Because they also have the much peace. And again, the assumption is that Rav is a description of the shleim. Just like Shalom Rav we said, it means a greater type of peace. And the only way to get to the greater type of peace you just told me is through learning Torah b'bittul, which comes through davening b'bittul. So if in the earlier pasuk I see that they also have Rav Shleim, they must also be in on this game. They must also have access to this Shalom Rav, which had to have come by the preface of davening. Umavur ba'Maamar the Shalom Rav Shleim udavka le'eves terasecha, as the Maamar says. You can only have Shalom Rav, i.e. Rav Shleim, it's the same thing, if you have the situation of Oyav Yisrasecha, She'oyav Yisrasecha, Tzadeh Yisrasecha, you love the Torah based on the fact, because of its being the Eibishter's Torah, the Avazu al Yedei Agdamas HaTefillah, Agdamas HaTefillah, Knas V'Alef U'Beis. This love can only come through first having the Beidah of davening. The question is, the two psukim seem redundant. They're both saying the same thing. A situation of much peace by those learning Torah with a bittul that's brought on by the Hagdama of Avodas HaTefillah. So the Rebbe first makes a difference between the two psukim in concept, and then explains how the davening affects them differently. First, the difference in concept. The Sholom being spoken about in V'chol B'nayich L'mudei Hashem V'rav Shalom B'nayich is different than the Sholom being spoken about in Shalom Rav. Achu Inyan Hu Dini Maamar Azal. Let's get the full context. Yeah, what's the full Maamar Azal around this pasuk? The Gemara says, "Al pasuk V'rav Shalom B'nayich Al Tikrei B'nayich Al B'nayich." Don't read sons, read builders. Upirush B'nayich Chok Maamar Azal Mai B'nayin Edu Tamid Chachamim Sha'iskim B'miyana Shaleilam. Who are the builders? The Gemara says elsewhere, builders are Talmidei Chachamim. They are the builders of the world. The fact that we're talking about B'noich in the first pasuk gives you the answer, gives you the difference in the two psukim. The pasuk V'rav Shalom B'noich shemedaber b'inyan pu'ulas ha'Torah ba'olam. In the pasuk V'rav Shalom B'noich, where we're talking about the effect Torah has on the world, the fact that the נחum can construct the world through their learning Torah is b'meile gama kavana b'v'rav shalom b'noich hi be'ikr le'inyan hashalom shenasa ba'olam aydei sekatera. The ending of the pasuk, the Rav Shalom that is ascribed to these b'noich, to these b'noich essentially, is the Rav Shalom that's being achieved where the Torah is having an effect. Torah is having an effect in olam. Rav Shalom is being experienced in olam. Shal Torah nidin las shalom ba'olam, as the Rambam says. Torah was given to make peace in the world. Peace in the world. The olam is the hadgasha. Or the pasuk Shalom Rav leves terasacha moisif shal Shalom Rav nimshach gam lahatalmidei chachamim atzma lo yeves terasacha. In the pasuk Shalom Rav is saying that this great peace that's achieved through Torah learning in the proper way is directed not at the world but also at the Talmidei Chachamim themselves. The people who love the Torah in a special way. And that's why only in this pasuk are they described with that title of Eves Erasecha, which we said can only be achieved through davening. We're talking about people who have loved the Torah from the Eibishter's perspective, a love which is fed by a preface of davening. And the people in the previous pasuk are only described as B'nayich, not as Eves Erasecha. For Torah to have an effect on the world, for Ribuy Hashalom to be in the world, it doesn't require the Hagdama of Avodas HaTefillah. Bittul is not required, as the Rebbe will explain later. For Torah to affect the world, to paskin halacha, to be mechavel amitas shel Torah, you don't have to have the ultimate bittul. For that to trickle down into yourself, yeah, you want to appreciate it. You want to feel it. You don't want it to have an effect in the world. That's a higher level. That requires a full bittul, because you can only be a channel for the ultimate divine if you are totally bottled to it. So long as you have a self-consciousness, you can't absorb that. Your self-consciousness is not a stira to bring the Eibishter into the world. So if you're not fully up to par, the Ribuy HaShalom could still have an effect in the world and bring peace in the world. But for that Shalom Rav to come to you, you have to be Eves Terasecha. So what emerges now is that we have a couple of dargas. We have, let's call it Azva Mes Torasi. We have Torah the way it is on its own. Torah the way it is on its own is, even Torah Shel L'mayla is Chachmas Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it has no Gilead Insaf. And even that is hidden. Then we have Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, which creates Torah Si, a revealed Torah Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ein Insaf is being brought into it. that requires bittul. Hakdamas of tefillah, that's oya v'serasecha. And then we have v'rav shleim b'nayich, which seemingly is also the Torah, which requires oya tefillah, but the Rebbe says no. It's a different branch of that shalom. It's the way shalom affects the world, and that doesn't require oya tefillah. This darga in v'rav shleim b'nayich, we're about to embark on a long journey right now. The Rebbe is going to uncover to what seems to me 4 dargas as we lead up to Rav Shloim B'Noich. In other words, if you start the Maamar here, you think there's just 2 dargas. There's Shalom Ba'olam and Shalom to the Chacham Matzma. But the truth is, in Shalom Ba'olam, there's multiple stages. And the Rav Shloim B'Noich, which we're talking about, is the 4th stage of those stages. Shalom Ba'alev Serasecha being now a 5th one, be above and beyond that. And it's all to appreciate the greatness of Shalom Ba'alev Serasecha, because the more you separate it from different levels of Limnat Torah, the higher and higher it becomes. So we're going to spend now a lot of time to explain how the relationship of Torah and the world has multiple layers. Rav Shloim B'Noich is the highest of those layers, and that highest of those layers then goes to the Eibes Serasecha themselves, which requires a whole different level of bittul. So that's where we're heading. It says the Rebbe Sivav, v'yuvan zeh behektem ha'mavur b'hamaymer. Dibra maschil shalom rav tafshin dalet. We're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to go more into the Maamar of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe says, "B'inyan avodas tzadikim shemekayim mesa'olam shenivra ba'asara ma'amares." He brings the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that the world was created by Asara Ma'amares, and the kiyum of that world is through tzadikim that have the Aseres HaDibris. Shazeu gamkin inyan tamid chachamim sha'iskim yarashlayla, which is correlated to the Rav Shloim B'Noich, the effect that Torah scholars have on the world. They're building the world. If you focus on the Mishnah, but it's the same nekuda. Being mekayim the olam that was created by Asara Ma'amares is the same idea as building up the world through Torah. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, Asara Ma'amares shebahem nivra olam mechuvanim keneged aseres hadibris. The Zohar tells us Asara Ma'amares, aseres hadibris are matched up. Mishkasav asara akaf b'shekel hakodesh, and the total tally of all the karbanos brought by the Nesiim, b'chanukas hamizbeach. One of the ending psukim says asara hakaf. Each spoon was full of 10. And by saying asara, that tells us that there are 2 asaras that are related to each other. Asara ma'amares teres hadibris. Umash talmid chachamim beinu mesailam hu shemamshichim es aseres hadibris shebahem klula kol atera kula kol gam ma shtamid vasik asad lechadesh ba'asara ma'amares shebahem nivraila. The Frierdiker Rebbe says building the world, being mekayim the world, consists of what? It consists of bringing aseres hadibris into asara ma'amares. That is the wording of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maamar. Okay? So again, we're trying to elaborate on the nekuda of Rav Shloim B'Noich to appreciate the highest level that it is, by first prefacing, Bichlal, there's a relationship between Torah and the world. Tzadikim are mekayim the Welt through bringing aseres hadibris into asara ma'amares. And the Rebbe asks a similar question when we're discussing Torah. He said, what do you need a baruch hu b'Torah tchila? You have Torah itself. So what do you have? What do you need aseres hadibris? You have asara ma'amares itself. Even though in the beginning of creation also the world was created perfect. Hainu. In our context, you don't need aseres hadibris in asara ma'amares. Asara ma'amares are themselves a manifestation of the Eibishter. There's already a gilui likus b'elam on account of Hashem speaking the world into existence. So was darf man kiyum ha'olam, was darf man aseres hadibris in asara ma'amares? Says the Rebbe, the kavanah is to bring more light. You're right, there's one level of light. The world was created with light, a lit up world, a klare Welt, a lichtige Welt. But we have to bring a higher light. Till we bring down an higher than the sheresh of the Nivraim. Which can only be done through Torah, can only be done through aseres hadibris. The Rebbe here is alluding to what's going to unfold in the next sif. There's different levels to the taste v'ser. There's a plain taste v'ser, but that kind of taste v'ser could be Sheresh HaNivraim, and then there's higher than that till you reach an that's higher than Sheresh HaNivraim. But I'll call upon him the inyan of Aseres HaDibros and Asar Maamar is a Tosfos error. The Rebbe is mitzayint also in 57, where he says it clearly. The inyan akiyum shemekaimim meso'elam shnivra b'Asar Maamar is hu al yedei shemamshichim gilir el yesher. The sustaining the world, keeping the world going, means bringing a new light. Because in the Chinami, the world on its own was created with Gilul Likus, and that's one level. But we have to bring a higher level. So at this point, the Rebbe is saying, this is the Nekuda of Rav Shlomo ben Noach. Talmidei Chachamim increase peace in the world. The operative word is increase. Marbim dafka. There's already Sholom ba'olam, in a way. There's already a certain level of peace, of a likus in the world. But that's a default level of peace. That's not introducing anything new. That Sholom ba'olam shenasa detimid Chachamim. That Sholom ba'olam shenasa detimid Chachamim, the peace in the world which is achieved through the Chacham learning Torah, who leirak shlilas inyanim built it tzuyim hepech hasholem, is not just not fighting. What's peace? Peace is no conflict, or peace is active peace. So pashtus, as soon as you have no conflict, you have a certain level of peace, but that's not marbim sholem. Hepech hasholem is one level. Being shaylo inyanim built it tzuyim is one level. Shnasa yedei achatayim, right? Because hepech hasholem will come through sin. They don't just avoid sin, which would mean the world should be, as it is in its perfection state, in its original perfection state, the way it was in the beginning of creation. The truth is they're so great, they don't need to have any active avodah to do that. The whole chet, the whole helim in the world doesn't exist. Them. They see the world in its perfect state. So that's already a big thing, but that's not their achievement. They increase peace. They bring a lot of peace. Through their learning Torah, we have a gili of atzmus, hecher, than the Sheresh of worlds. And we complete the kavanah of the Eibusha to have a dir b'tachtonim in this world. Dir b'tachtonim meaning a higher, newer level of Eid Sof. So that's what it means, Rav Shlomo. That's what it means, the P'ula of Torah and Welt. Welt is godly by its very creation. On one level. You bring a Tosfos error, you bring an extra gilui, you bring a Ershel Ma'alim Sheresh HaNivraim, you bring Atzmus. It's a whole other level. That's Rav Shlomo. That's Marbim Shalom. That's increasing peace in the world. And that can only be done through the Esak HaTorah of Banayich, of Boinoich, Talmidei Chachamim. But again, let's peel this apart. Let's get into this on a deeper level. Let's fully understand the levels that we're dealing with. Because here that I was using interchanging language, but the point is just jumping from point A to point B, from being the world in its perfect state, default state, to a higher state. Truth is, there's multiple stages there. The These words become the important words now. The Lashon of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maamar is that the Kiyum Ha'olam is through Aseres HaDibros. In the end of the day, we mean, l'chayra, that the Kiyum Ha'olam happens through Torah. Right? The additional that comes from Tzadikim is through Torah study. So say it. Was it a play on words? Aseres HaDibros, Aseres HaMaamaros, 10 and 10, it matches. Just say, Kiyum Ha'olam is through Torah. The fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe chooses to say that the Kiyum Ha'olam happens through Aseres HaDibros tells you that the Rav Shlomo, the Marbim Shalom, has to do with the part of Torah that was given at Aseres HaDibros. The Yeshleimer, the Kavanasi B'Zeshem Madgish Aseres HaDibros Dafka. Shenitnu B'matan Torah, the Kavanah of the Frierdiker Rebbe, by stressing that we're talking about Aseres HaDibros, they were given when? B'matan Torah, is Shekiyum Ha'olam Ha'yidei Ha'avedah Torah Mitzvahs Shala Achrei Matan Torah Dafka. It's not just Torah which enhances the Shalom Ba'olam. It's the Torah the way it was after Matan Torah. Because if you think about it, when we say that there's inyan of Tosfos er Ba'olam, of adding light to the world, that's what does the Kiyum Ha'ilam, that already was before Matan Torah. The Frierdiker Rebbe is stressing to us that the true Rav Shalom, the true Marbim Shalom, is the Torah that was after Matan Torah. Let's go into it. He's going to identify a few levels. The Avos, Adam Rishon, and then Matan Torah. The Hagam Shegam Ayadei Avodas Avos. The Avos Hindan Merkava. Nimshach Teis V'Ser Ba'ilam, even though the truth is that through the Avodah of the Avos, they were the Merkava, and they brought also Teis V'Ser, those words that we're looking for, L'Chayda. Teis V'Ser and Velt, they already brought. Sholom Ma'ila Miha'er Dasara Ma'amaris. Higher than the Erd of Asara Ma'amaris. Let's see the artist for a second, verse 62. The Rebbe brings some Ayin Beis and Ateres. Sefer Maamar Teres, Rabbi says clearly, the Eina Kavanah Raksha Isaiah Ershabi B'Riyas Elam Haya Behester. The Kanitza La'avos Hushba Begilui. It's not just that there was a Helam and a Gilui. First it was hidden, then it was revealed. Kiyim Sheni Teisaf Erchada Shaloi Haya B'Riyas Elam. The Rebbe says clearly that the Avos brought down a new light. And in 61, the Rebbe actually relates it to the union of Merkava. Because in Tere'er, the Alter Rebbe says, the Avos Hema Merkava Lahalis Bechinas Adam Le'edin Sashal Malam Yishtashlis. The purpose of Merkava is to bring the level of Adam, the man model, the finite model of Elikus, into infinite model of Elikus, higher than Ishtashlis. That's why they had access to that air. Because they were a Merkava, whose inyan is to Malam Ishtashlis, therefore, they had access to higher levels of air. So I'll call upon what do we see? That the Avos had Shalom Ma'ila Me'asara Ma'amaris. So what's the Chiddush of Matan Torah? Says the Rebbe Mikol Makayim, nevertheless, Mikevan Sha'aveda Sa'avos Haisa B'Koyach Atzmam. Since the Avos were working on their own terms, with their own power, Sharlenit Stavos, because they didn't get a commandment to do Torah and Mitzvahs, this is their own initiative. Lachin Ha'er Shenimshach Hayadei Avedasam Hu B'Klalus Rak Mimchina Sheresh Nivrayim. So what can they reach? Yes, a Teis V'Ser, but only an that's related to, or that comes from the source of all creations. As known the proof from the river called Ein Etam. There was a mikveh on top of one of the gates in the Beis HaMikdash. All the gates were 20 amas tall, and the mikveh has to be at least 3 amas tall for a regular person to fit inside. So the Gemara says, Shema Mina, that the Mayan Ein Etam was 23 amas above the Harabayas. Because water, when it flows from a higher spot and then comes back up to another higher spot, it can only reach as high as the point where it came from. And you can try this in your own home. If you take a straw and you pour water down, it's always going to even out. The highest point, there can never be a water reaching a higher point than where it came from. And true, there's the other way as well. Like if it's in a V, the water will never stay at one point higher and at one point lower. It's always going to stay at even levels. So that's the Eichacha, that a person working with his own keiches can only reach the source of those keiches themselves. And it's incomparable to the hamshacha that kiyum mitzvahs after Matan Torah can accomplish. The Yisayim mitzvahs says the Rebbe, not just are the avos not a good barometer, but gam avedas adam rishon. Even the Avodah of Adam Rishon, the way he was in Gan Eden when he was charged with guarding it and working it, before the Chet Tzadas, which at that point his Avodah was higher than the Avos. The Rebbe brings from Eter, where the Rebbe Rashab says so clearly. The air that was being brought down through his Avodah was incomparably greater than the world the way it was itself. The Rebbe says in parentheses, fascinating lashonos here. It's something similar. It resembles that which we can accomplish now after Matan Torah. Adam already was charged with a me'ain of the Tarag mitzvahs. What Adam Rishon was doing in Gan Eden is like what the mitzvahs do now. That also wasn't enough. That also isn't the ultimate taste for Sarah. It was only a ha'ara. The Rebbe brings from Eter again in 69. The mitzvahs the ha'aves reiches hayu u'kemoiken yeshleimar gam da Adam Rishon. That chisaron of the Avos mitzvahs also applies to other Rishon's mitzvahs. There could not be an ultimate fusion of the higher and lower realms because the Gzeira existed. The Gzeira means the cutoff. Literally, it means decree. But the Rebbe will always say Gzeira means an upshnit. There was a cut, there was a chasm, there was a gap between higher and lower worlds. After Matan Torah, and only after Matan Torah can we bring down Amshachas Atzmus. And this gives us a deeper appreciation to what the Chachamim do through learning Torah. We're not just looking bichlal for a gilui of stuff that's higher than Velt. That you had in a few stages already before. Adam Rishon, the Avos, etc. We're looking for Amshachas Atzmus. The ultimate inyan of dir b'tachtenim, the ultimate inyan of dir latzmusei. In other words, v'rav shleim b'noich at its highest level is amshachas atzmus. Shalom Rav, as we're going to explain, mitzvah in the next year, is bringing that shleimus hakavana, that fulfillment of Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu dir b'tachtenim, also to Talmidei Chachamim themselves, and that requires a whole other level of bittul, as will be explained by Sherman in the coming year.